In the last section, we finished off with the publication of Kevin Dunnian, the Scottish Freedom of Information Commissioner's decision notice. Following from that, which was front page news in Scottish newspapers, there were editorials by editors in the Daily Record and in the Glasgow Herald about this story. The government began to take a real interest in my story then, even though I'd been flagging this up for the past year or so with government ministers. But it was only in the publication of Kevin Dunnian's decision notice that I think they began to really take what was happening at NHS Ayrshire seriously. First of all, I met with Derek Feely, who is the Director General of the NHS in Scotland, and I met with him in St Andrew's House on the 19th of April 2012, and I was in there with him one-to-one, face-to-face for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I basically told him what I'm telling you. I told him this story, and he is a very, very decent, thoroughly professional man of great integrity, and he made it clear to me that he would be investigating this so that real lessons would be learned, so that something like this wouldn't happen again. Following that meeting, I then had a meeting with Nicola Sturgeon on the 31st of May 2012 with Derek Feely in attendance, and my MSP, Mr Adam Ingram, another good local man, and the whole story was told again. Nicola Sturgeon informed me that she would be bringing in Health Improvement Scotland, the government health watchdogs, to carry out an even bigger investigation into NHS Ayrshire as to their processes and their management of critical incident reports. Robbie Pearson of Health Improvement Scotland and Mark Aggleton came to my house, and again we sat for a few hours and went through all the information and the documents and the files that I have, thousands of emails going back for years relating to this case. They listened to everything I had to say. When Kevin Dunnian's decision notice was published, virtually the same week, a sort of memo was put out by Mr John Burns, the new Chief Executive. We in Hatton had left early and had took a retirement package from NHS Ayrshire, and John Burns, who had been Chief Executive Officer at Dumfries and Galloway Health Board, came in as the new CEO NHS Ayrshire, and he released a memo stating that yes, things had been done badly, but they would be ensuring in the future that lessons would be learnt, and that even though things had been very bad in 2006, that since early 2011 things had improved dramatically at NHS Ayrshire. Well, as we'll subsequently find out, that did not prove to be the case. Health Improvement Scotland went in, they met with me, they decided to take as their starting point for their investigation January 2011. So let's see how things have improved since then. And the Health Improvement Scotland report, which again can be accessed online, if you click on the link, it'll take you to that report. It again was an equally damning, if not more damning, report into management practices at NHS Ayrshire. They decided at the end of the day that they could find no evidence whatsoever of organisational learning from critical incident reports from the beginning of 2011 up until the point their report was published, which was around about mid-2012. So it just did not stack up that lessons were being learned by NHS Ayrshire. I've met with John Burns, I've met with Martin Chain, the new chair of the board at NHS Ayrshire. They've given me assurances that that new a new policy is now in place and that they will invite me back, probably sometime this year, to see the improvements and to prove to me just exactly how organisational learning takes place from such events. My main concern now, though, is that the lack of accountability on the part of senior officers at NHS Ayrshire and Arn. The likes of Bob Masterton and Fiona McQueen, who were the executive directors whose legal duty and responsibility it was to ensure that organisational learning took place from these events. Well, it seems to me that these people were just not doing their job. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know why they're still in a job. As stated when I was asking questions about this as a lowly staff nurse in October 2007, well, 5 years ago, Bob Masterton told me in an email that this was his area of executive responsibility. He was the man in charge of organisational learning from such events. Since then, we have things like this press statement here, which was released on the 28th of November 2011 by Professor Craig White, the Assistant Director of the Executive Medical Directorate. And here's what Craig White has to say about NHS Ayrshire's managing of critical incidents. NHS Ayrshire and Arn is committed to ensuring that if there is any possibility that there has been avoidable harm, this is investigated thoroughly and that we are open, honest and transparent about this. When reviews identify that there has been avoidable harm, we speak with people affected and report this openly through our clinical governance systems. NHS Ayrshire and Arn reports all significant adverse events through the Clinical Governance Committee, and all the findings, recommendations and actions for improvement are published on our website. And then he goes on to say, all NHS boards in Scotland conduct these types of reviews. However, we have been praised internationally as an example of best practice for our open and transparent approach to communicating about these reviews. This approach has been shown to make a significant contribution to work on improving the safety and quality of our services. And it goes on in this blustering tone. But yet, as was found out by Health Improvement Scotland in their investigation, at the time this was being vaunted in NHS Ayrshire and Arn, they could find no evidence whatsoever of organisational learning from serious adverse event reports. This is total nonsense. Adverse events continue to happen at NHS Ayrshire and Arn. They'll continue to happen at every health trust in Scotland. These are, though no one wants these things to happen, that they do happen in health trusts. During 2010, there were some bad suicide incidents at Cross House Hospital in Ayrshire. I can recall them vividly. At that time, Bob Masterton produced this press statement talking about such events. We have called significant adverse event reviews following 2 separate incidents in different parts of Cross House Hospital as part of our adverse events review process. Senior staff have been nominated to chair these reviews and initial work has now commenced. A significant adverse event review is a review and investigation into all the circumstances surrounding an adverse event. Both family members and staff affected by such events are contacted by senior staff as part of our commitment to involve them in this process. He goes on to say, we are rigorous in ensuring that the findings from these reviews are actioned and that progress is closely monitored and reported to our board clinical governance committee. Again, rubbish. Why the likes of Fiona McQueen, Bob Master and Craig White are still in post, I do not know. These people, as far as I'm concerned, are the people who are accountable for an absolute failure by this organisation to learn from critical incident reports and serious adverse event reports. I've had meetings with John Burns and Martin Chain, the chair of the board. When I put this to John Burns as to why there had been no accountability and why these people were still in a job, he said that he had looked at this very closely. He had taken a deep dive into the organisation, and that he found that really no one was accountable for any of this, because this was a systems issue. It was a systems issue. The systems were to blame. Well, I would have thought that someone in a health trust should be in charge of these systems. And surely, has Bob Master not been paid, and he's the highest paid public servant in Scotland, I believe, or the second highest, and £250,000 a year, is that man not paid to be in charge of this system? As I said at the time, in a BBC documentary that was made by Stephen McGee and Fiona Walker, which again can be accessed online. It was called How Safe Is Your Hospital? I said in that documentary that when you're in £250,000 a year, it's a systems issue. But if you're in £25,000 a year, it's a P45 issue. And I think it should be a P45 issue for some of these directors at NHS Ayrshire Nairn. I've put it to Martin Chain. I even, in a lighter-hearted moment, presented him with an object that I told him was a moral compass, and provided him with a poem about this to try and emphasise my point as to why he has not taken action to hold these people to account for these failings. But it seems nobody, either in government or in charge of the organisation, wants to take any action whatsoever to hold people to account for these failings that may well have led to deaths of patients at NHS Ayrshire Nairn. Today, almost 6 years after the original event, I am currently, at this very moment, I have reported senior directors of NHS Ayrshire Nairn to Police Scotland, the new Scottish police force, with allegations of criminal negligence. These investigations are ongoing, and I will be meeting these senior police officers in the next week or so to discuss the progress of this. Because at the end of the day, I believe, as a staff nurse who had an unblemished career in the NHS, stretching for 27 years, I believe that someone has to be accountable for these events at NHS Ayrshire Nairn. And I intend to pursue this as far as I can, to hold who I believe to be the guilty parties to account for their failures and for the disasters that they allowed to happen to patients in NHS Ayrshire Nairn. That's my story as a whistleblower in the NHS. If you're a nurse and you've got a similar story to mine, tell your story. Put it in the media. You've got nothing to hide and you've got nothing to be frightened of. Don't be threatened by bullying managers. Stand up and speak the truth and tell your story. There's great organisations out there like Kim Holt's Patients First, Get in touch with Patients First. There are people like you and people like me who have suffered at the hands of bullying management, and Patients First will support you in getting your story out there. You're not alone. There's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of nurses out there with similar stories to mine. So be brave and stand up and tell your story, and we can put an end to disasters like this happening in our NHS.